Welcome to your Weather Impact Extended Weekend Forecast, exclusively here on 13 WMAZ Plus. Going to plan out all your weekend activities, but we finally do have a rain chance in your weekend forecast to talk about. So we'll break down the latest with what the models are saying as a front does approach from the west over in the morning hours of Sunday. And then we'll talk about what's in store for the work week next week. But we'd like to start off and talk about our rainfall graphics. And surprise, surprise, it has been a very dry stretch once again. Only 2 days in the month of October, October 5th and October 6th, that we recorded rain here at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. That brief bit of rain actually did bump us up back farther into the near normal category, but now we've seen a steady decline and we continue to be right smack dab in the middle of the dry category for the month of October. And just giving you an idea of how dry that we've been, October on average, you don't see too much rain, maybe just over 2 1/4 of an inch of rain. Well, if we're hovering dry for the month of October with those less than impressive rainfall totals on average, only about 0.45 inches of rain recorded in the month of October. That is shy of even a ½ inch of rain. So rain has been a real scarcity over the month of October and really dating back all the way through the month of September, which was nearly 3 inches below where we should have been for the month of September. But overall, we just continue to be above average in the calendar year, thanks to a very wet May, a very wet June, and a very wet month of August. 6 inches above what we normally see in the month of August in terms of rainfall, but hovering just below 3 inches above average for this point in the calendar year. So overall, we continue to watch that number go down, and this is as of October 16th. Which is this past Thursday. We'll continue to see if we have any more of these red boxes pop up in the last 3 months of the calendar year to bring that number a lot closer to average. But it's been a while since we really recorded some considerable and measurable rain at Middle Georgia Regional Airport. And along with that, the dry conditions do span all over central Georgia. We got an update to our drought monitor this past Thursday morning, and we didn't see too much change with it, very thankfully. However, we have seen many areas in this moderate drought still remain in the moderate drought. With that tan color, we have seen the moderate drought also creep farther and farther over to the east, now in portions of Crawford County and into portions of Monroe County. But the biggest change that we saw, patches of a severe drought spanning into west central Georgia, down in southern Georgia, and in fact within this orange color that you do see at the bottom of your screen, there lies even more extreme drought conditions, an extreme drought patch that is present within all of that severe drought. Almost the entire state is in some form of dry conditions, with the exception of Savannah, where you don't see anything in the way of dry conditions whatsoever. But it's been a very dry stretch, and we don't have too much rain on tap in order to improve these conditions as we go into the next week and we get another update to our drought monitor as of Tuesday, and then it will get released next Thursday morning. So here's a look at what Future View has for the weekend. Let's go ahead and start out on your Friday evening plans, heading out to the Friday night lights, heading out to any plans with your family and friends, just having a cookout. It is looking like some clear weather, maybe some high level clouds that are in the forecast, but that's going to be the only thing we have to talk about. At least it's more eventful than what we had over the course of this past work week. But now we go into 11 p.m. Still maybe a few clouds in the picture, but overall nothing in the way of rain chances that will be of concern as we go into the nighttime hours. As you're waking up on Saturday, it does look like there's a decent amount of cloud cover, especially the farther west that you are. So it could start out as a bit of a gloomy beginning to the day on Saturday, but as we transition into the afternoon, we'll start to see that cloud cover break apart. Northern Georgia does have a very minuscule chance of seeing maybe a spotty and a very brief light shower, but as we transition into your Saturday evening, conditions clear out all across the state of Georgia, especially here in central Georgia, and then we go overnight into early Sunday morning, where we once again have some clouds in the overnight hours. But here is finally a rain mag here over to the west. This is a frontal boundary that will be driving over to the east, and take a look at some of those darker red colors. That's going to indicate some strong, maybe even some possibly severe thunderstorms back over into central Alabama. And obviously this legend up here, the farther on the right that you start to go, even if you start to see some flashes of that pink color, that's going to really indicate some very, very heavy rainfall rates. Thankfully don't see that, but let's see if that holds together as it moves towards us. We do still see maybe some pockets of that dark red color, but mainly just some orange and a red color, and this is right across the state line. 9 a.m. on Sunday. So it still looks like the front is trying to make an entrance here in central Georgia. We'll go hour by hour and plan this out. 9 a.m. still on Sunday, crossing the state line from Alabama, and then finally starting to move into our western counties around 10 a.m. So it still does look like maybe if you're heading out for church plans on Sunday morning around 8 a.m., 7 a.m., 9 a.m., conditions should likely be dry, but we could see this front come in a little bit earlier. But right now it does look like it's starting to move into our western counties around 10 a.m. We fast forward to 11 a.m. where it's really encompassing most of western central Georgia. But notice there's not any shades of that dark red, indicating that the precipitation rates are getting a lot less heavy in nature. So that's going to be a good thing in terms of not having any thunderstorms. I wouldn't rule out maybe a couple rumbles of thunder the farther west that you live, but there will be a steady weakening trend with this boundary as it continues to move across the area. This is at the noon hour, still a pretty gloomy and a pretty dreary forecast all across the area. And then we transition into 2 p.m., holding on to some rain chances the farther south and southeast that you live. And then finally, we start to clear out as we head into the late afternoon to evening time frame on Sunday. Still plenty of residual cloud cover, maybe a few spotty light showers or sprinkles, and then some breezy conditions start to settle in as we go into the nighttime hours Sunday. And then that takes us all the way to Monday, the midnight hour, transitioning into the beginning of the new work week, and almost all the cloud cover is out of the picture. So let's take a look at the humidity throughout the next 3 days. Humidity is actually going to be at very low levels. Dew point temperatures in the 50s, maybe even the 40s for your Friday night forecast. We'll start to see a steady rebound, some of those light green shades building back into the forecast throughout Saturday afternoon. And then where we start to see maybe some of these dark green colors, it's going to be a bit more of a humid atmosphere the farther down towards the Gulf Coast that you go. But we are beginning to see our frontal boundary, which is going to be somewhere right here in the middle of Alabama at the 9 a.m. hour. As it continues to progress into central Georgia, it still doesn't look like we have really swampy air to work with. I do believe areas farther down to the south will have just a tad bit more humidity to work with, and that may result in more of a continuous line of rain and more widespread rain chances the farther south that you live. But going into the evening hours on Sunday, here you go. There's all that dry air, that fine line between the light green and no shade of color whatsoever. And there's the dew point temperatures in the 40s as we go into the nighttime hours Sunday into Monday, and you're very likely going to walk out to a very cool, crisp, and dry atmosphere for Monday morning. Now let's talk about the winds. I did mention that the breeze is going to pick up during that second half of Sunday, but first things first, nothing really in the way of a sustained wind that's maybe up to about 15 miles per hour per se. These are the gusts, so these are just going to be your occasional wind values. When you have wind gusts that can get up to 8, 9, 10 miles per hour, but we really look for those shades of blue and yellow, and we're not seeing any of that over central Georgia. I don't really think the winds are going to be a factor for your Friday evening plans, and the wind's not really going to be a factor throughout your Saturday afternoon. But there's those shades of blue and yellow over to the west. We start to see those creep closer and closer as we go into Sunday morning. Widespread blues, so some slightly gustier winds, maybe more of a steady breeze if you're walking out the door very early on Sunday. These patches of red are going to indicate your gusts that can get up to 30, 35, maybe even 40 miles per hour, but none of those look to be present over central Georgia. We could just see some gusty winds up to about 20 miles per hour as that front does pass through, maybe even the occasional gusts up to 25 miles per hour. Some patches of that yellow in a select few areas, but as we transition through your Sunday, we will hold on to a steady breeze. So I would plan on some windy conditions as this frontal boundary does make its way through on Sunday. Otherwise, nothing really in the way of a breeze to impact your forecast whatsoever. So here's a look at your weekend outlook. 80 degrees for a high temperature on Friday, which in fact is one of the lowest temperatures that we've seen throughout the past work week. Many high temperatures have been somewhere in the mid 80s, maybe even down into the low 80s, but we'll bring those back as we go into Saturday afternoon. But the morning lows, 49 degrees as you walk outside on Saturday morning. If you're like myself, you're going to wake up early and make that trip up 441 up to Athens for the Georgia game. It's going to be nice and cool and crisp for the morning hours, so make sure that you pack something in the form of a light jacket until you can get inside your car and crank up that heat just a tad bit. 83 for that high temperature on Saturday, no rain chances worth worrying about. And then we go into Sunday, slightly warmer high temperatures in light of the rebound in humidity and maybe a few clouds that are helping keep the temperature a little bit warmer. But 57, still not a bad feel in the morning hours whatsoever. I think we will start to see cloud cover move in, and we will have a couple of scattered showers, maybe even a storm or two. And when I say maybe a storm or two, we're just talking a couple of rumbles of thunder that you could hear off in the distance. Otherwise, the afternoon time frame I do believe is looking pretty suitable for some outdoor plans. 80 degrees for a high temperature in light of kind of the gloomy and dreary atmosphere that we'll have. We shouldn't warm up as much as we would on a crystal clear sunny day like Saturday per se. So let's talk about your football Friday night forecast. It is just continuing to be amazing weather as we head into each Friday in the month of October. 78 at tailgate, clear and less humid. That's going to be the big story. And if 78 is too warm for your liking, good news. Right around kickoff, temperatures right there around the 70-degree mark, maybe into the upper 60s in many areas, and then down into the low 60s as you go into final score time. The main message I want to hammer home is going to be bring some form of a light jacket, especially if you're catching yourself watching a really good game, obviously going down to that last play, the last 2 minutes of the game. Temperatures are going to be quite chilly, and the last thing you want to be is freezing cold, sitting on those cold bleachers out there at football stadiums. You want to be able to enjoy the game in comfort. So maybe I would have some plans to have some form of layering if you are planning on staying throughout these football games throughout tonight. But overall, no rain chances to worry about whatsoever. But we are in the month of October and the season of fall, so let's talk about your pumpkin picking forecast. No rain chances on Saturday, and as you go into the afternoon, temperatures will be a lot better than, say, the morning hours. How about that temperature increase from the morning low into the afternoon high? That's going to be temperature increase of 33 degrees throughout the day. Saturday is definitely your day to go head out to the pumpkin patch. Sunday, I would avoid going in the morning hours, but if you absolutely have to go on Sunday, the afternoon is still going to be a more pleasant time to go pumpkin picking. 40% chance of a shower or maybe even a low-end storm throughout the morning hours on Sunday. And I did mention that game up in Athens, Georgia. The Bulldogs squaring off against a top 5 opponent, the Ole Miss Rebels up at Sanford Stadium. This game is going to be a 3:30 kickoff. College game day going to be there. Obviously, lots and lots of excitement and hype around this big-time matchup. Tailgate time around noon, still maybe a little bit on the cooler side, temperatures in the upper 60s. Then as we go into the afternoon, I think the cloud cover does start to decrease. Your temperatures will warm up. 76 by around kickoff time, not going to feel too warm whatsoever. And if you've heard about the striped Sanford Stadium, many of you may be concerned about wearing that black, obviously absorbing the heat. I don't think it's going to be an unpleasant atmosphere whatsoever. I think 76 is going to be a great temperature around kickoff time. And then as you're heading home after the Dogs get a big time win, 71 degrees as the sun begins to set right there around the 7 p.m. hour. In fact, just before the 7 p.m. hour, sunset at 6:55 p.m. We'll talk a little bit more about those sunset times here in just a little bit. But weekend grillcast, I have green spatulas all the way through Sunday. And I have that green spatula on Sunday because your rain chances are mainly for the morning hours. So if you do have plans to cook out after church, that's where things would be more yellow spatula territory, expressing a little bit of caution. But overall, if you're planning on grilling out in the evening hours on Sunday, I think you'll be good to go. It just might be a bit of a breezy atmosphere, but the temperatures should be a little bit cooler, going to make for some very pleasant feeling air as you head out to the grill and fire up the Blackstone or fire up the Traeger. Here's a look at your pickleball forecast this weekend. You just want to avoid going on Sunday, I think. And obviously, we keep talking about it. Your rain chances are on Sunday morning. However, you might still have some of those wet courts if we don't have a lot of sunshine to allow for evaporation after that rain falls. So I would just make plans to go to the pickleball courts on Friday and Saturday. I think it's going to feel a lot better. Maybe a tad bit on the warmer side for Saturday as you go into the afternoon hours, but going in the morning, I think is your best bet. And especially, with the exception of Sunday morning, of course. And then just kind of have some caution out on the courts. The last thing you need is a sprained ankle from slipping on a puddle that's still standing there out at the pickleball courts in the afternoon. So my recommended weekend attire, I think it's going to be amazing short sleeves and shorts weather for the afternoons. Obviously, have your sunglasses ready to go. It's going to be a pretty sunny atmosphere, but if it's a little cool for your liking, switch out that short sleeve t-shirt for a long sleeve t-shirt or some form of a light layering. The evenings, I think, is going to be more so some jacket weather as those temperatures begin to cool down, especially the nighttime hours, because temperature is going to be even cooler as you head into, say, 10, 11, or 12 o'clock into each and every night. Sunday morning, you're going to want to have that rain jacket, that umbrella, all your rain gear ready to go. And the main message is have it ready to go, especially for that morning commute to church. But the earlier you head out of the door, it might be a better case scenario, but you may run into some rain as you're heading out of church into those late morning hours. Now let's talk about what's in store for the work week next week. Clear conditions for Monday as we go into Tuesday. Once again, another clear afternoon. But take a look at this. You do see this thin line of cloud cover. This, in fact, is actually another frontal boundary. Obviously, it's going to be a moisture-starved atmosphere here in central Georgia and across much of the southeast. After that first frontal boundary ushers in some very dry air. So when we don't have a lot of moisture to work with, these frontal boundaries can't produce some widespread rain. So what this is going to be is more so one of those invisible fronts. It's just going to reinforce the cooler and drier air that we have in our forecast. So overall, we're not looking at many rain chances. In fact, no rain chances through Wednesday, through Thursday, all the way until we get into Friday at the end of the work week next week. Then maybe we start to see some signs of increased cloud cover, maybe some rain chances farther over to the west, but it doesn't look like another big time frontal system that could sprout maybe even some severe weather. And of course, we're going to continue to keep the humidity at very dry levels, dew point temperatures in the 40s and the 50s. Speaking of the 40s, we haven't had to talk about them too much as of lately. We've been struggling to actually get down to your average low temperature as of recently, which has been down in the upper 50s. I think it was down in the mid 50s as of this time last week. Well, now it's down to 53 degrees in each day of the work week, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday. And go ahead and make a graphic for Friday, and you can probably put a 46 or a 47 on there. Each day going to be not only below average, but below the 50-degree mark. How about 46 to walk out the door on Tuesday, 45 to walk out the door on Thursday morning. It is definitely going to have a significant chill in the air. If you haven't been packing that light jacket for the morning hours, I think next week is going to be a week that you want to do so. Afternoon high temperatures, they will fluctuate a little bit. So like what we were talking about, the first frontal boundary passes through Sunday during the morning hours, and then as we go into the afternoon, conditions will get cooler and drier and clearer throughout the day on Sunday. Well, Monday we'll start to feel that cooler air with only a high temperature in the mid 70s. We will see a brief warm up into Tuesday afternoon, and then later Tuesday into the overnight hours and early Wednesday morning, frontal boundary number 2 arrives, and it reinforces that cooler and drier air for Wednesday and Thursday as we head into the later portions of the midweek. But let's take a look past that. Past the end of your 7-day forecast, it does look like we have a slight probability of seeing some above average temperatures here in central Georgia. This is just one box over to the right of the near normal category, which you see here in the gray. This is for October 24th, so this is going to be next Friday all the way until the day before Halloween. Maybe some slightly above average temperatures, but your average high this time of year, 79 degrees. So if you're slightly above average, we're only talking about temperatures around 80, 81, 82 degrees. So it is going to be a bit of a treat for those of you who are very reluctant to move into the fall season and wanting to hold on to those slightly warmer temperatures for as long as you can. And this does kind of match up with our precipitation outlook because we have a very good probability of remaining below average in terms of the rainfall from October 24th all the way until the day before Halloween. Hopefully we can extend this into Halloween itself and we have a nice and dry forecast. But take a look at this, not 1, not 2, but right there in the middle of category 2 and category 3 right here over to the left of near normal. That means the chances are growing of having below normal temperature or below normal precipitation, got jumbled up on all my terms right there, below normal precipitation for that time period in your extended forecast. So the drier we are, the clearer your conditions are likely to be, and more sunshine is going to lead to some slightly warmer temperatures. So that does match up with where we are compared to average on the temperature outlook that we can see. The precipitation outlook does give us a good idea about. And speaking of Halloween, let's look ahead to the important dates that you need to know as we head into the back half of October and eventually into November. Halloween going to be in 14 days, so 2 weeks from this past Friday if you're watching over the course of this weekend, or 2 weeks exactly from today if you are watching on Friday. Time change, that will be happening 2 days after Halloween on November 2nd. It's really overnight between Saturday into Sunday, so overnight between the 1st and the 2nd of November, but it is getting very, very close, and something I kind of realized a lot of people didn't realize it was this close, and that's going to be a big factor that we'll talk about after this graphic. Election Day going to be 2 days after that, so Election Day going to be on November 4th, which is just 4 days after Halloween, that first Tuesday that you do have in November. And then Veterans Day, that will be an important day because it's on a Tuesday. It's going to be a week after Election Day. That's going to be a random Tuesday that many kids in many school districts do have off of school. So you'll take your kids to school on Monday, but Tuesday they are going to be staying home, and then you'll go into the back half of the school and the work week, and they will head to school on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So a 4-day school week for those of you students watching. I know you're excited about that, but it is kind of odd that it does fall in the middle of the week, but at least it gives you a bit of a cushion. You just have to worry about going to school on Monday. Hopefully none of your teachers schedule any tests for that Monday, and then you'll get another day added onto your weekend just one day after. So speaking of the time change, this will be daylight saving time ending. So this is going to be the fallback scenario that we have. And basically what it means, you are going to be sacrificing later sunsets for an hour extra of sleep. So I know many of you are going to wake up on Sunday morning on November 2nd morning, and you're going to feel a lot more refreshed and maybe a bit more rejuvenated. And that's because you got an extra hour of sleep during the overnight hours. Officially at 1:59:59 in the morning, so right before the clock does hit 2 a.m., you will probably see many of those digital clocks if you're staying up and just want to watch a really cool scenario play out. If you have those clocks that change automatically, they will go from 1:59 in the morning all the way back to 1 a.m. So we won't officially hit that 2 a.m. hour until after the time change officially occurs. So falling back, sacrificing later sunsets for an extra hour of sleep. So what does that mean for about the time that the sun's going to be setting? Well, that time change happens on November 2nd. Here's a look at your sunrise and sunset times for November 2nd. Sunrise gets an hour earlier, so your sunrise goes back to before 7 a.m. and your sunset will be happening before 6 p.m. So many of you are probably going to drive home from work that following Monday on November 3rd and going to notice that you're starting to get into dusk time pretty early. Hours of daylight going to be down below 11 hours. December 1st, I did include this date because you see it is the earliest sunset that we do have over the course of the year. 7:19 a.m. your sunrise, so not seeming too bad. Sun rising about the time that many of your alarms are going off in the morning. But your sunset 5:27 p.m. and it will be at 5:27 for a couple of days past December 1st, but that is the earliest that the sunset time does get to, just over 10 hours of daylight on December 1st. And then December 21st, 4 days before Christmas, but the winter solstice, that first day of winter, that's going to mark our shortest calendar year in terms of hours of daylight. 7:33 a.m. is when the sun will rise, so getting a little bit later than the previous dates that you do see. And your sunset will begin to get a little bit later, 5:32 p.m., but overall, sunsets around 5:30 are just criminal. In my personal mind, if I did operate on a normal schedule, however, I go to bed around 6:30 or 7 every night. So I, for one, am absolutely thrilled about it finally being dark when I am going to bed. But many of you are just going to notice the day's getting shorter, and obviously it can put you in a bit of a gloomy feeling, but just make it a point to try to wake up early around these sunrise times to maximize the amount of daylight that you do see day by day in your routine. And we are in the season of fall and finally getting a fall feel in some of those temperatures at the very least. But when are we going to start to see fall in the form of that fall foliage, those beautiful leaf colors? Well, I would recommend maybe taking a trip up to the North Georgia mountains, up to Helen, Georgia. They have Oktoberfest going on until the end of the month. It is a very fun time up there in the mountains. But North Georgia, those southern edges of the Appalachian Mountains, actually going to start to see those leaves turn color within the next week or so. Late October, we're already kind of into the midpoint of October, so once we transition into next week, that's going to get into the time frame that peak fall foliage will happen in the North Georgia mountains. Up in areas like Atlanta, Gainesville, Athens, Georgia, just north of us here in central Georgia, peak fall foliage will happen maybe a week or two after that into early November. But down here back at home, peak fall foliage not going to happen until mid-November. And this is just kind of on average. We may trend a little bit earlier. We may trend a little bit later, closer to Thanksgiving time in the back half of November. But it does look like we still have about a month to go until we really start to see those leaves change color. And it's obviously going to create your fair share of some yard work once those leaves do begin to fall. And we do have some points to talk about in the tropics, specifically this one wave right here. So right now it is a tropical wave in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, and it's kind of northeast of the northern edge of South America. 10% chance of development over the next 48 hours, so obviously not looking like we'll have a named storm over the course of this weekend, but 30% chance of developing over the next 7 days. I know these chances aren't very significant, but this is a big talking point because number one, you can see it going into this shaded area into the Caribbean Sea. We have not had many areas in the Caribbean outlined so far this hurricane season for potential development, but there are many extended models that are going out about 2 weeks into the future, and they're trying to initialize some form of a named storm system, maybe even possibly a hurricane forming in this warm water that we have in the Caribbean. This is far from set in stone, but it does look like we are seeing growing confidence that this tropical wave will continue to the west and it will move into the Caribbean. What happens past that is anyone's best guess. It's still nothing to fret about, but it is the first system that we could see move pretty close to our neck of the woods, besides moving up the Atlantic coast like we've seen many tropical systems. So we'll keep a close eye on it. Don't go believing anything that you see on social media about one individual model run that's posted 300 hours out in advance that says there's going to be a strong hurricane in the Caribbean or maybe trying to make landfall in the United States. That is anyone's best guess. You don't know what you're going to have for breakfast in about 2 weeks' time, so you shouldn't go believing a forecast that's forecasted about 2 weeks out in advance as well. And we do have another tropical wave, scratching our heads a little bit why this is actually outlined, but it's a center of low pressure establishing itself. Not necessarily a tropical system, it's more of a non-tropical system just due to where it's formed, but it's just down to the south of Nova Scotia and Halifax in Canada. 10% chance of developing over the course of the next week, and it is going to move away from the United States, so nothing really to worry about with that. But there are two areas outlined, so the next two names that we can claim in the Atlantic hurricane season will be Melissa and Nestor. And speaking of how many named storms that we see, let's go ahead and talk about what we see on average. That's normally about 14 named storms in a hurricane season, so we're getting into that territory right now. Half of the named storms that normally form usually strengthen into hurricane status, 74 or greater miles per hour in those wind speeds. And then of those 7 named hurricanes, we typically have 3 of them gain major hurricane status, category 3 or higher. This is what Colorado State forecasted for us earlier this year. They did forecast an above average season by 3 named storms. 17 tropical storms is what they forecasted, 9 of which can become hurricanes, and then 4 of those hurricanes are classified as major. So here's our numbers so far as of October 17th. 2025, we have seen 12 named storms, so creeping close to average, but still a good amount shy of the forecasted total by Colorado State. 4 of which have been hurricanes, so only 1/3 of the named storms have strengthened into hurricanes. We're still a good deal off of what we typically see on average as far as that goes, but major hurricanes, 3 out of the 4 hurricanes that have formed so far have been major hurricanes. So we're already at average as far as that goes, and we could very well maybe even in this back half of October, I would say that's going to be our last window to possibly see one last major hurricane, but it doesn't look like any of that's on the horizon. And we are running out of time when it comes to hurricane season. It will officially end on November 30th, and we do see the frequency drop off pretty drastically after this week. But it's not impossible to see tropical systems form into late October, even into the month of November. So that's why you still need to keep an eye out for the tropics and stay up to date with what we tell you here at 13 WMAZ in the near future as we continue to monitor those 2 specific areas of development, and we'll keep you posted throughout the month of November if there's anything to worry about. But as of right now, nothing to worry about, and Friday and Saturday going to be great days for your weekend forecast. Just be sure to have the umbrella ready to go on Sunday morning into the early afternoon, and then we'll clear conditions back out and welcome in some of the coldest air of the fall season so far for the work week next week. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you at Monday on 11 a.m.